So, and we recognize that these changes have affected and will continue to affect the emotional and physical well-being for our youth in Washtenaw County, but also youth in all parts of our country. So we're going to take a chance to examine how these changes are impacting our youth, and hopefully through this conversation we can help draw some attention to the efforts that are being made and what we need to do as a community to better support our young people around substance use and the criminal justice system. So that's just a brief overview about what we're going to be doing here today, what we're going to be discussing. So I will let our panelists tell you each a little bit about themselves. So first we have Dr. Deidre Hurst, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Sorry, just had to find the unmute there. Hello, I'm Deidre Hurst, very happy to be here today. I'm an assistant professor at Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. And as an educator and a researcher, I've examined specifically opioid misuse among adolescents. But I certainly am not the expert on this panel. I think that the youth are the experts. They are the ones that are living this experience real time and have the most insight into what we need to do in order to support them at this moment. So again, happy to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Hurst. Next, we have Sharday Korhonen.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm also very excited to be here and so happy you all are here with us. I am the engagement program manager with Ozone House. I work primarily over at our drop-in center. I've been with the agency and in youth work specifically for about 9 years, but more specifically providing substance use support for about the past 5 years. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to Scott Phillips. I know he didn't do a very thorough introduction for himself, but thank you again for also joining us and moderating today. And I just want everybody in the room to know, so Scott Phillips is also our youth employment coordinator and oversees our youth peer outreach worker team. So there might be some opportunities for some questions later on. I want you to know who's in the room. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but primarily we work with young people 10 to 25 throughout the agency and specifically with the engagement program. So again, happy to be here and excited to talk with you all.
Awesome, thank you, Sharday. Next up, we have Alice Hudson, so I'll let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm the peer substance use support advocate at the Ozone House and a little mixture within the engagement program. My job is kind of to help destigmatize the substance use within youth and just in general, and just kind of help support like the organizations around and hopefully, make some new changes. Yes, I'm very excited to be here for this conversation.
Thank you, Alice. We're also super excited that you're taking the time out of your busy day to be here. And last but not least, we have Ronson, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm also very excited to be here and be a part of this discussion. I had the pleasure of working at Ozone House as an intern from January up until August to complete my BSW at Eastern Michigan. And I also have a post-associates in addiction studies. But as Dr. Hurst says, I'm very eager to hear about what the youth have to say because they are the experts. They're the ones that are dealing with it firsthand in our communities. So I'm just excited to be here and lend support and be a participant.
Great. Well, thank you all. We're super excited to have you guys here. So if you guys are ready, I am going to sort of kick it off with the first question. And anyone of you four are able to answer it. And we can just go sort of round robin. We can take turns and we'll just go through them. So my first question for you guys all today is, could you please explain the difference in strategies used when trying to engage youth that is aimed at prevention, at risk, or already youth involved with the criminal justice system or substance use disorders? And I can always repeat the question.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about kind of what we're currently doing and what we've been doing in the past, and also recognizing that right now a lot of things are changing, right? So I think it's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So like I mentioned before, and Scott might be able to say this a little bit more clearly, but we do have a regular team of peer outreach workers that work with us. So young people, typically between the ages of 16 and 18. Who are employed at our drop-in center. So that has been for years kind of our main way of both supporting young people that we're regularly seeing, being able to provide some, financial support to young people, some training, and equip them with the tools to be able to support their peers. What we're coming up against is some challenges right now in being able to access young people. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But really between that and really having a drop-in center for us, I think has really kind of increased our access, especially downtown Ypsilanti. Is where our drop-in center is located. And on average, we were seeing about 40 young people a day. So I think when we're thinking about how we engage young people, I always have to give a shout out to that space and, to the drop-in center first and foremost. For us, we had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to have a space that's just open and accessible regularly throughout the week to young people. I also recognize that that's not the case across the county, and we do have to get creative. So one of the other ways that we do that is also through the 24-hour crisis line, which is also now a text chat line that young people can tap into. But in addition to that, it really comes down to building those community partnerships and getting creative and taking those opportunities with other youth serving organizations to really connect and hopefully build those consistencies when it comes to referrals and connecting young people. So that comes down to the social justice system and the juvenile detention center with community mental health, the referrals that we're getting in from them. For us, sometimes we'll see young people right as they're exiting psychiatric emergency, right? We might be that next stop or that next call. So I think those are just a couple ways that I think we're able to engage young people before they've been engaged in any other system, and also once they have. I think just to mention a quick adjustments that we made recently is more so on the electronic end and virtual end by kind of utilizing virtual platforms like Remind 101, Zoom for virtual programming right now, still trying to do that in-person outreach, really alternating who's on the crisis line so that communication flows a little bit more cohesively, right, to get to access to folks quicker since we're not in the building. So those are some adjustments that we've made, but please let me know. I don't want to ramble, but if anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to talk more about any of those processes.
Scott, if I may, as you posed the question, it made me think about both the upstream and a downstream approach, right? So, and I shared the story, maybe some of you have heard it before, but just imagine that there are two men fishing on the river, and all of a sudden these babies start floating down the river. And the man who's in the back of the boat, he jumps out and he starts to grab the babies that are floating and throwing them to the shore to get them out of the water. And then the man who's in the front of the boat, he jumps out and he starts to swim upstream. And the guy's like, hey, where are you going? Help me get these babies, right? And he's like, I have to go upstream and stop who's throwing these babies in the river. And I think that that is the approach that we have to take with this crisis. We have to find out ways that really can stop and prevent young people from ever getting engagement with the criminal justice system or, ever, becoming addicted to substances. And I think the way that we do that is, for me, very concrete, that we listen and we respond to what we hear. We cannot do things to young people. We have to do things with young people. And so it's important to observe and listen and be responsive. And in order to do that, we have to have engagement. And so even though, we can't be there face to face right now, I'm just very, very impressed with what Sade talked about, and those steps to really be engaged virtually. But we have to engage young people in order to stop them from ever getting in the river. And then we also have to engage them once they're in the river. And it's not enough to just throw them to the bank, right? It's not enough to just say, hey, you should go to treatment. You have to stay in relationship with them. You have to figure out how to support them through their treatment or support them through their engagement with the criminal justice system.
Exactly.
I appreciate you saying that, Dr. Hurst, because I think one thing we talk about a lot is people aren't going to seek treatment until they're ready. But if we can be there to listen, to support them, to help them get to whatever that next level for them is, when they are ready, they're more likely to reach out or to ask for support. If we can build those relationships, have those conversations, actively listen, and take that information in and work alongside them, opposed to telling someone what they need to do.
Yeah, I think it's also important, like, it is extremely important to engage the young people to, like, be able to get them in the space. But for example, like, I've worked at the Ozone for 2 years, and I feel more comfortable calling Sade or Scott or other staff members at the Ozone than I would some of my own family. So being in that space with people who I do consider family, and having those supports outside of my home, if I don't even have supports in my home, it gives me something to, like, look back on. For example, if I were to be wanting to do something bad, I could be like, oh, well, these people care about me. These people wouldn't want me to do these types of things. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Alice. I have sort of a follow-up for you specifically. Just you being the young person on our panel, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think adults in this space and in our community can do to engage young people before they've started using drugs and alcohol, or while they're using, or after they've sort of gotten in trouble? What are some things that young people work with young people that we might be missing or we're not thinking of?
I'm not sure, because a lot of the young people that come to the drop-in are extremely engaged, but just like informing, like having opportunities for people to learn, but without it just seeming like a boring seminar. I know when we have had, like, the real talks, or when we had Unified come, everybody stayed in the building, not just because we had pizza. Like, just having those real conversations instead of it just being some, like, you guys don't really do it, but just some childish activity. Like, it being, because we are a lot more informed than a lot of adults tend to think we are. So we like to be treated like that when it comes to the information that we do know.
Right, or when somebody comes to, I feel like it's helped you guys in the past when it's approached as nobody's trying to pretend to be perfect, right? Trying to, really be real with it and say, like, look, if you are going to do these things, we know that we can't stop you from doing everything all the time. And that's just not realistic. But if these things are going to happen, are you doing them around people that you can trust? Are you doing it do you have someone around who is going to be a designated driver? Or do you know where you're getting these things from? All those things I feel like are even more important than just all about preventative measures. Just knowing what can help
Just
and
keep
what
your
can't.
distance and keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I appreciate what you two both just said. I think what I take from that is creativity, engagement, having honest, real conversations, recognizing young people make choices, right? And how can we support those choices safely through harm reduction measures? That makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. The conversations, like, I've had at the Ozone, and, like, within groups and within just talking to staff members, have helped me help my other friends when it came to them doing something like that. Like, I've had friends call me and they're like, hey, I'm gonna go do this substance, and, like, I know I can't talk them out of it, so I give them every possible piece of advice that I know, and it does end up helping them. Makes it so they don't make the wrong decision. Like, make it so they're at least safe. And that has happened. And I'm sure it does for a lot of people.
Thank you, Alice. So my next question for everybody is, so we know sort of when COVID had happened, a lot of things had to shift and adjust. And so prior to COVID, what youth mental health services were available, and has COVID affected access to these services from what you all are seeing?
A lot of places, for example, the drop-in center, which I personally get my mental support there, and things like the neutral zone or corner health center or other counseling services have a lot shorter hours, if they have any hours whatsoever, and a lot of their services aren't as, like, they don't have as many services as before. And it also just being in the house and not having the normal environment we do, it kind of just makes it difficult to even think about just going to those places, setting up that appointment.
Mm. Alice, can you talk a little bit more about that, and if you feel comfortable, just kind of what you've been hearing, like some of the experiences you've heard that, you know, other young people have been feeling or experiencing?
I know a lot of young people feel very isolated right now, and like a lot of those young people that don't have good relationships with their parents or good home lives, like they're there all day now. Instead of being able to be at school or do after school activities, they're just stuck and they can't go anywhere. And even if they don't have, even if they do have a decent home life, it's still isolating not to be able to see your friends, or not, like for people at the drop-in, it sucks not being able to go there or being able to go to the different activities in the summer. Like it's just like everything we look forward to is is gone. I personally like it just because I don't have to get up as early for school. But yeah, a lot of kids are struggling with it right now because they've just got so much going on, but nothing at the same time.
Mm.
Alice, do you feel like it would be beneficial if there were spaces provided where young people could still get together but social distance at the same time? Or maybe, I know a lot of people are having trouble with the virtual learning right now, or like you say, they don't have environments where they want to be at all day per se. Do you think it would be beneficial for them to be able to come to the same space and maybe all work together on their virtual work, but be 6 feet away from each other? Do you think that would help in any way?
Yeah, definitely. I think Jessica, I know she's not here right now, but I think she was mentioning trying to do something like that at the new building. But yeah, I think that would be great because it's still, even if we don't necessarily know all the people in that space, a lot of kids do need help with work. And so that gives you like an actual excuse to go, and then you get to be around other people at the same time. But I think one barrier is right now is parents. A lot of parents don't want you to go out. And I know there's nothing you can necessarily do about that, but it is the little loophole for some people.
I think that COVID really has created challenges with our safety net infrastructure for young people. And so I think that as adults and as, people who are vested in the lives of our young people, we have to figure out how to connect to them and build whatever type of safety net we can. We see that for behavioral health, access to telehealth, right? You can get online and talk to a therapist or have those services. But a lot of the platforms are not geared toward young people. Young people may not even know how to access that. You have to have like the Blue Cross card and all the stuff that goes with it. And so I think, being able to, figure out how to make those type of telehealth advancements more available to young people is important. And then also recognizing that we don't have those trusted adults with eyes on our young people in the way that we used to. And so as adults, we have to be intentional about, checking in. And maybe it's a Duo or a FaceTime or, a Facebook Messenger, and like literally looking at and talking to young people as much as we can.
I agree with that statement. I personally have a thing when it comes to telehealth, just because usually you're talking to somebody you don't necessarily know. But if there was a way to get people in the community to be able to reach out to those young people that they do know, I think that would be extremely beneficial. And it makes any person feel special, like when like a staff member from the place they go to or their teacher tries to, check up on them.
For sure. I think one thing that COVID did was sort of make the community and people working in this community adjust, but it also showed the flaws when something comes up, right? We recognize we've been doing this one way so long and we do it well, but all of a sudden something throws that off and we're all sitting here like, oh man, sometimes this technology isn't working right. Sometimes someone's phone number changed and they can't reach us, so we can't reach them, and we lose contact to someone we've been seeing on a regular basis. So there's all these things, and COVID's really sort of forced us as a community, as social workers, as community workers, to completely change the way we do things. Yeah. And I think there's been some gains, but also a negative impact on some of our younger people in the community, because we weren't prepared to have to do that. And I recognize that.
I also just want to say that COVID, I don't know if it's just me, I don't think it's just me, but COVID itself is a burden on young people, because young people are what are being blamed. Like young people are the ones spreading it. Like that's the whole thing. So if somebody in our family gets it, we might not have even given it to them. They pass away or something, but everybody's gonna look at us, and then it's gonna be our fault for our family member dying. So because it's hard, you have 2 or 3 friends going to the mall, you want to go, you don't have to be touching them, but if you do that and then somebody in the family gets it, it's all pointed towards you.
So it can be really scary, and it sounds like there might be some blame going on without knowing what's really happening. And I appreciate you saying that. That was something that definitely just hadn't came to mind for me. And I do think a lot of what's being pushed in the media is kind of that communication around either young people not getting it, or if they get it, it won't be too bad. And so I think there's contradicting messages, because then they can also put someone else's life in jeopardy, right? That's how they're talking about it. But I don't think we're doing a good job at talking about what the reality is, right? What does that really mean? And what is that responsibility really communicating? So that can feel really heavy.
Yeah. I mean, even being able to really create a difference in our language, because we need to physically distance ourselves from other people, but we don't need to socially distance.
Right.
So, figuring out how to educate young people about how to socially be together, but physically distance is important, and it can help alleviate some of that guilt that's placed on young people when it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we've sort of been talking about how there's been this shift on how everybody's doing something, and recognizing the schools right now are primarily all remote learning. And the schools are a lot of times that break, and Alice, you mentioned this, that break from maybe whatever's going on at home, right? You get to see your friends, you get to get away from that environment. And with everything being virtual, that break isn't there. Have the schools taken any steps to help sort of mitigate the negative effects of remote learning, or offering some more one-on-one check-ins, or some in-class or in-person spaces? Are there things that the schools are doing to support young people where they're lacking that support right now when they used to get it from the schools?
I'm only able to speak on my school, which is, Ypsilanti Community High School. I specifically have a time where I can check in with my teacher on Friday, since I'm dual enrolled. And the teachers have office hours to help with work, 1 day a week. But other than that, I feel like it's kind of the complete opposite. Because when we're at school, we do assignments in class. And, you know, a teacher or two may give us something to take home. But here we're in class watching the teacher, listen to the teachers talk all day, and then they give us all of our assignments. So we have 7 like high school classes, plus if we're doing enrolled. So that's like 23 assignments a week if they give us 2 assignments. And they're more than likely going to give us more than 2. So that part is stressful. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any spaces to actually just talk about like what's going on. There hasn't been any support along that line, or if even like a conversation about it in any emails from the school or anything. They're just,
what I'm hearing you also say is your school day that used to be that 7-hour block has now been extended because the assignments you would do while in class are now getting pushed to after school hours.
even
So
though
your day is now extended that much more.
yeah, even though we're expected to be on the Zoom calls from 8:20 in the morning to 3:20.
And then about how long does it take you to complete the rest of the work for the day after you do that?
It really depends on the assignment. I know last night I spent like 3 hours on one assignment, and the day before that I spent about 2 hours on one assignment. So like it can take, especially because I specifically am dual enrolled, so I've got WCC classes as well. A lot of the assignments do take a really long time, and a lot of the teachers I don't think have fully considered that, or they have, and it's just not their priority right now. Because
Yeah,
a lot of
them.
even my high school assignments tend to be pretty long.
Right. And it seems like they're trying to get adjusted to the formatting as well. Probably a lot of the older teachers are really having a lot of difficulty adjusting to this.
Yeah. My own WCC teacher said that we're gonna have to help him learn the Blackboard. That was funny. But yeah, it definitely is extremely stressful because it's only like the 2nd or 3rd week of school, and we're already stressed out and overloaded with work, or that's how it feels at least. So like I don't even want to imagine what it's gonna be like in a couple months.
Appreciate you sharing that with everybody else.
I would just add that, you know, in some of the all of the interviews that I did with people who misused opioids when they were an adolescent, family trouble or family-related trauma was correlated with opioid misuse. And it didn't necessarily have to be something that, you know, we could just say concretely like, oh, there was physical abuse or something that outsiders would say this happened to this child and thus that's trauma, but more about the youth's experience. And if they experience their family life as traumatic, if they experience their family life as being dysfunctional, then there was a higher likelihood that they would use opioids. And so I think that we have, I don't have an answer here, but more of just an observation that we really need to figure out ways to give people some type of, you know, respite, right? Like if they're, even if their parent is like a great parent on paper, if there's animosity there, that young person needs a way to kind of get away and break and breathe. And we have to figure out how to do that in a physically distant way or in a safe way. Yeah.
Exactly. Even as adults, I'm sure if you had to be stuck with your parents right now, it would not be great.
I feel like what's difficult for my son is not having the interaction with all of his buddies. Like even when you are going through the school day, which I'm sure is the same for your age group, you get to, you know, have pastime and in between classes where you get to, you know, move your legs and move to a different environment and interact on a even if it's just for a short period of time, you get to interact on a small level. But now all that's been taken away, and for our seniors, they've been going through school all this time, and then now they don't get to go to prom, and they don't get to have a traditional graduation. And it's just not. I don't know. I feel like it's really difficult and strenuous in so many different ways.
It is. I was very disappointed to start my first year in college online when I was supposed to be on. So it's not the same as a seniors. I don't want to imagine that I feel extremely bad for seniors right now. Yeah. But it is very difficult not to have those opportunities and have the things to look forward to. Because the school events are like the big party that, like, that's what we kind of consider, like, not as a party, but as that type of activity.
And be in a different environment, all those things. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
This sort of goes along with what you all have just been talking about. So what are some of the biggest challenges, and you guys have talked a little bit about them, that has created to youth feeling connected to the support they need? Because we know we can't be in person and there's schools aren't open. Are there other challenges that you are seeing around how we can connect with people? Or are there creative ways you've found to connect with people and support each other?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first half of the question?
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Thank you, Sade. You guys talked a little bit about some of the challenges COVID's created for feeling connected with our peers and support systems. Are there any other challenges that you guys haven't talked about that you're experiencing? Or are there some creative ways that you have been able to get connected to support systems or to friends that we as adults and community workers should be knowing about, that maybe we could help implement some of that?
I know one thing, like, that isn't, like, we're not able to do anymore is, for example, like, when we're at school or around other people, you can kind of read other people's emotions. Like, you can kind of, somebody's not okay. So then somebody can check on you. It's a lot harder to call somebody and be like, hey, I'm not feeling okay. Because especially considering that it's over the phone, sometimes you really just need somebody to cry on. Or just somebody to laugh with, even if it doesn't necessarily have to be sad. But we're not able to do that, which is another kind of struggle. To know there's a lot of days where when somebody's feeling down, but nobody even has a clue.
I think when we look at substance use and mental health, those personal interactions that we're now unable to have could lead to a decrease in someone's mental health or an increase in someone's substance use because they aren't able to have those social interactions in those physical in-person supports that they're used to. And you mentioned something that I've thought a lot about recently, Alice, is when you're with someone in person, there's that body language, there's the energy they're giving off, the facial expressions. A lot of that is lost. Even with Zoom calls or teletherapy and that stuff, we can't always get an accurate read on where somebody's really at. And I appreciate you saying that, because I've been thinking about that a lot recently and wondering what the solution for that is. How do we, as a community, support young people who are going through all this without necessarily always knowing what's going on underlying? Because young people are really good at telling us they're okay. And I had a teacher, Dr. Sheila Brown, when I was younger, who referred to young people who were good at putting on a front that they were okay as the walking wounded. And she supported me a lot when I was going through things when I was younger. But a lot of that was developed on observation and personal interaction, which I feel like we're missing right now.
Sorry, continue.
Okay, I was just gonna say, Scott, what you were talking about makes me think about how young people who maybe don't have the best home lives are able to kind of create their own reality at school sometimes, and they can have, this safe, fun, exciting place to be. And now you have to have a camera on so people can see everything that's going on in your house. Maybe they can hear if people are arguing behind you. And so there's this window that used to be a veil there, right? Where people you felt like you had this separation between your house and your school, and now that's
Definitely. I also think it comes with, it's important to note that it's a lot difficult because of the stigma around having feelings, the stigma around crying, being able to tell somebody that you're not okay without it seeming like you just want attention. Because that's all we grew up with, especially around middle school, because that's when everybody starts expressing their feelings. And it was just coming out too much sometimes. So that was kind of just what was implanted in our brains. Same, especially for men. Like, it's not okay. Like, a lot of people think it's not okay for a man to cry or a man to express his feelings. But it's also like that with a lot of young people in general, which is another reason why I'm not just going to call you and say, hey, like, I'm not feeling okay. If that stigma was gone, I'm sure it would be more accessible to just call somebody.
Going off of what you and Dr. Hurst mentioned, I'm thinking back to when the space was open, how many people came in there for so many different reasons, and they all expressed their needs in different ways. Some people were louder and wanted to, as Dr. Hurst said, kind of create their own reality. They want to have fun with their peers and laugh and use the computer and play the game or listen to music, get their bus tokens, to get to their next destination, and or get help with their homework, or just maybe needed someone to speak with in private for a second, or just to be in a different environment away from home. And not having access to any of those things, just, it's hard. And with people not being able to express their needs anymore, even makes it that much harder, because like we said, there's a lot of people that come in there, and they come in there with they're pretty quiet. They just come and get their resources and they leave. But you really don't know what they have going on at home, or what they're, when they leave our space, what they're getting ready to go do. Exactly. And now there's so much more idle time, and which brings in more opportunity for substance use, or getting into trouble, or just because they just want to be out of the house, they just don't want to be bored.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to say something, but I forgot.
That's okay. If it comes back to you, just blurt it out. So do any of y'all have thoughts about how this could look different right now, right? When we think about what we're doing, what we've done, and where we want to get to, realizing that this is the new reality for a lot of us for the foreseeable future. What are some things that we can be doing differently to engage young people, to provide safe spaces without putting young people at risk of, getting sick or transmitting it to someone else, but still feel connected, still feel safe, still feel supported, that isn't on your computers? Because I recognize you're doing all your schoolwork on computers, communicating with all your friends on your phones, which is a small computer, and then that those interactions aren't happening. Is there something we can be doing? Or to the adults on the panel, there's some things that you've heard other communities doing that could offer some of that in-person support safely?
My first thought is, I think, just worth saying when we're together, like all together today, is like, it has to be in person. I think that's been the theme, that's been a consistent, thought for us, but also even the feedback that I've been getting from young people and feedback I'm getting as we prepared for today's conversation, right? I think there's a lot of processing that we need to do around what's going on, but the reality is we keep on ending up right back in the same place. That physical being in that same physical space, even with that distance, right? Like, still finding ways to be in physical space with other people is just, it's needed, it's necessary. So I think we just got to get creative and figure out how we do it, how we utilize larger spaces, how we utilize our outdoor spaces by getting, heat lamps, and we're going to try and get one of those smaller fire pits to do like a bonfire while we still have a little bit of warmth out there. But finding opportunities to really get back in the same space, I would say, is just top of the list in some form or fashion. We got to figure it out.
Yeah, I think also just for people that need one-on-one things, like, even just taking somebody out, like taking a young person out for coffee. They don't necessarily have to drink coffee, but or just going out to eat, or even just going to go sit by a park and just have that space to talk, or even just being asked if you want that space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was also, like I mentioned to Sade, I personally think pen pals is a good idea because it's fun
Yeah.
and different and not necessarily online,
Right.
but you can, yeah, and it also takes away that fear of, if you have social anxiety or just anxiety in general, it takes away that fear of having to actually say those words out loud or hear somebody's response or look at somebody.
I love that.
I love that idea of a pen pal, Alice. That's great.
I did in like 4th grade and it was awesome.
I would just add that all devices are not created equal. And so we understand that some young people have like a iPhone with a cracked screen that they can hardly see on. Some people are sharing devices. And so one of the things that we can do is, as much as possible, make sure that young people have working devices that are just theirs. They have to share maybe a laptop, but we all maybe have phones laying around that we don't use, iPads that we don't use, and gift those to young people who don't have access.
So making sure everybody has equal access to usable, up-to-date technology, so at least it doesn't create an even larger gap than what we're starting to see right now.
And if it's theirs, then they can feel safer to express themselves, right? Like if I need to chat with a friend about something that is going on in my life that's personal, I'm not going to do that on a computer that I share with my brother or sister or whatever. Like teenagers especially really need their own device that they can have some type of control over.
Exactly. My school gave us laptops, but we can't, they're so restricted, we can't even look up a normal website that wasn't approved by the high school. Like I can't even do my WCC work a lot of the time because the websites and the links I have to go to that are restricted on the laptop. So all I can do is strictly their work.
So even with the schools trying to provide those resources, it's so restricted and limited that it still hampers the work that you need to get done on a daily basis.
Yes.
I think the other thing that comes to mind too, and I know Alice and I have talked about this, so it's not the first time we're hearing about it, but I think we've talked together about like how do we create more I don't want to say more online platforms, but a more kind of cohesive system for everybody to be able to know like what's going on every day, right? So some sort of youth-focused community calendar. So we're working on it right now. So I know there's some folks in the room that we might be asking for some support with. But I think that's came up pretty consistently too, is knowing where to go to get that information. When events and programming is happening, where can folks go that's just kind of streamlined so they know, as a full calendar, what events are happening that day and how to access them. It's been a pretty consistent theme that's not really that easy right now.
So I have one last question for y'all, and then I want to leave a couple minutes. I know Dr. Hurst has to leave right at noon today. I want to be conscious of that time frame. But how do we change our peer-based support models, right? All of the models that we use and that I've talked to other agencies are using involve being out in the community at events with people, talking to people on the streets, right? Meeting people where they're at. And it's something I'm struggling with as someone who supervises a team of young people who does that work. How can we create a safe space or a new model to provide that peer support that our young people need and are lacking? So that's my last question as the moderator for you all, but it's also personal because it's something I'm struggling with the work I'm doing right now also.
We've talked, me and Sade and I and Samaya have talked about that question a lot, but it's really hard to get to actually come up with something, considering we have to do social distancing, how are we going to do outreach, a lot of places aren't necessarily open, and a lot of the people we do outreach to aren't at the places they normally are.
And a lot of places aren't willing to take that risk either, to have people within their space in that capacity. Or and it's especially difficult now. I feel like that the weather's cooling down. In the summertime, it'd be much easier to do kind of activities outside and make sure that people are away from each other. But now, I feel like that's another barrier. Just the weather getting ready to get cold. That's people don't want to be outside, and so you're either going to need a big place or to be outside, and both of those pose different challenges.
I think people are intuitive and resilient, and I think that the more that we can bring conversations to people that have the power to make a difference, right? So bringing parents and young people together and maybe having some discussions, and so maybe the parents can hear from young people about some of the challenges, and then maybe if 2 or 3 moms and dads talk, it's like, oh, well, maybe we can create this for our kids. So even if you're not able to create the space physically, maybe you can create the intellectual space for parents and young people and people who are invested in young people's lives to start to have those conversations.
That's a great idea. I think that's a wonderful idea. Have a couple, like maybe a few close friends, like for instance, Alice, you, Samaya, and maybe a couple of other friends. Maybe your parents talk, and you guys have a space where you guys can go and work on things together, and the parents can rotate and provide assistance or something like that, and have a whole bunch of little networks like that may provide a big difference, especially for people who don't have a healthy environment or support system in their life.
I definitely believe that is an amazing idea, but also those kids with not the greatest support or like home lives. Also, for example, like I have it decent at home, but my mom is not willing to talk to other people, like other parents, unless like she has to type thing, like just to connect and like get our kids to hang out type thing. A lot of parents aren't interested in that type of thing, which is also another little loophole.
And I think one of the barriers we face as an agency is what's the liability working with a team of minors out in the community during a pandemic, right? That's a conversation I've been having a lot with my supervisor and other people is if we are going to be trying to do these events, what liability then falls back on us if someone does get sick or gets a relative sick? And so that's another challenge that we're facing. When we think we might have sort of a plan or an idea, it seems like another barrier pops up, once we feel like we've broken one down. So it's a tough place.
This does spark the thought for me. There's a couple harm reduction based programs out in Baltimore and in San Francisco that I feel like have a really strong peer-based model where they are taking folks that are just already doing the work, right? Folks that are already out in the communities. And I think about translating this for young people, communities, schools, programs, where if we do have folks that we know have a network already, right? Incentivizing folks with resources, providing them with resources to do that distribution. I think I want to put it out there as a thought in case that sparks anything for anybody. But I think we're continuously trying to figure out like how do we get that greatest reach? And I think we do have the capacity to incentivize, but in all transparency, I think what we're expecting to look a little bit different with virtual incentivizing is very different than we expected, just because we're tapped out, folks are tapped out, young people are tapped out of just a lot of the virtual programming right now. So it's been really tough for that to be just financially incentivized. But maybe thinking about our outreach also being financially incentivized for the networks that already exist.
As I have grown children now, but as a parent, if someone said to me, this is something your child needs, this social interaction, then I would take on that liability. I would figure out how to make it happen for my child. And so I think that, just really helping parents and caregivers understand the importance of that social interaction. And then also, how can they do it safely? I think we look at the NBA, right? Like they don't have COVID, right? They figured out a way to create a bubble.
Right.
We may not have the resources to make an NBA bubble, but we do have, some resources to put some things in place to help protect our kids.
Right.
And we have schools. Like my school has every student's email. We get a couple of schools to send out that email. Like that's a couple hundred kids that were just reached, a couple hundred parents as well, because they get the same emails as us.
One thing I'm sort of taking away from all of this is that there are spaces and that not every young person needs the same support, but how do we open up some of these larger spaces within the community to provide in-person connection and support to some of our most vulnerable young people, or our young people where home is not safe, right? If you have a school that's 90% empty right now, are there a couple classrooms that can hold 8 people, on certain days where some of those young people can congregate? Maybe they're working virtually in the classroom, but they're doing it with peers and maybe one on-site support person, but really evaluating what resources and spaces are in the community that can allow for safe congregation of young people to get the social emotional support as well as the educational support, and also a break from home.
Exactly.
So Dr. Hurst, I know you are on a tight time frame, but we have a couple minutes left. If anybody has any questions for our panelists, now is the time to ask them. You can type them in the chat box and I can ask them, or you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask our panelists. All right, well, if there aren't any questions, I really want to thank our panelists for being here, for taking the time out of their day. Oh, nope, I have no questions. And really sort of painting a larger picture of what's going on in our community with our young people. So thank you all for taking the time out to talk with us today and be present and share your thoughts. Hey, Jen.
Thank you guys, it was great. I'll keep that in mind. I'm gonna reach out to some young people per Alice's suggestion. I think that was a great suggestion, just to take them out for coffee or something like that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, well, that concludes our morning session. Have a wonderful rest of y'all's day, and I know you guys will be back at it this afternoon. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.